All right. So, hey everyone, happy Friday. We're gonna get this thing officially started in just a second, but just thought I'd say hi. And joined by the one and only Mark, Rizzn Hopkins. You should
Yes.
put that in your official name if it isn't already. You should, you know,
The
change
one
it,
and only.
or just the Rizzn part. Put it on your birth certificate or something, or
Oh, for
your
sure. Yeah.
legal things. I actually know a fellow who legally changed his name to Human, and it's at
Oh, wow.
some strange, I guess, libertarian protest move where he views like his given name as like a slave name, and like I'm just a human. Why does it matter? And he just
I was
legally
going to say
changed
it
it to
sounds like a
Human.
very New Hampshire thing. Like it sounds like a free
Yeah.
state type thing. Nothing wrong
Yes,
with it, but definitely sounds like that's where it would come from.
and he's one of those. He is local, and he is one of those privacy conscious people
Yeah.
who never quite figure out how to make technology be privacy conscious. So like he doesn't really do email, or he doesn't have a phone,
Hmm.
so you can't communicate with him if something like a meetup location changes, and then he transfers files via like CDRs. He like I'll bring you a CDR or whatever, and it's just like all right, this is a little interesting.
The
So
dude that got me into Bitcoin still uses a flip phone. He doesn't trust smartphones at all.
yeah, I mean there is a I don't think that's necessarily smart, but there's a smart there's some intelligence behind that idea, right? Because
Right.
your phone is spying on you incredibly. On the other hand, SMS is one of the least secure kind of forms of encryption
Oh,
communication
yeah.
possible. So, you know, win some, you lose some, right?
I'm knowing him. He's probably using a burner, and because nobody knows how to contact him, he doesn't get a lot of communication. So I guess security through obscurity. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of like saying like, oh, it's kind of like your hand gets injured, so you cut it off. It's just
Right.
like, like you don't want the government stealing your money, so you just don't have any money.
Don't have any money. Yeah.
It's like, it's one way of doing it. It's like
Yeah.
that's more of like the monk lighting yourself on fire kind of form of protest, though. It's not
Right.
exactly doesn't really make you make it very long. Well, I forgot to announce that we're live in Discord. Let me just do that real quick. Um, all right. Yeah, so it is kind of funny. And just on the side note, before we do like the official launch up, I do think it's kind of funny how it's like committing to a news show type thing makes you sort of pay attention to things in a little bit of a different way. And
Hmm.
before I got lazy, admittedly, and would just the day or two before just go on Cointelegraph and just like scroll down through all the headlines and just be like, all right, let's talk about this one, that one, that one. And
Right.
it doesn't really work that way anymore because the crypto news outlets are such trash these days. There's just nothing. It's just all market pump stuff and like regulation, lawsuit, and that's it. And it's like nothing that happens. So
If it, yeah.
yeah. So I've mostly switched to using Twitter as a source of like headlines, but as you can see, like most of the ones I prepared were tweets, but that requires a little bit more active participation where I have to actually like remember things that happened and comment on them so that when I scroll back on my feed, I'm like, oh yeah, these are the things I kind of talked about in the week. Let's like
Hmm.
extra talk about them.
That's kind of what I've been doing with the merge show is because I can't I do two sources of news. I go to like the tech meme and see what's like trending
Mm-hmm.
today, just so we can have like one story that's like a now thing, and then I'll just see what I posted to my Telegram room for the previous week,
Mm-hmm.
and like if it was good enough for me to talk about in that context, it's good enough to probably talk about it on a discussion show. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can't. I've built a news aggregator that I'm hopefully getting to version 1.0 next week that tries to like spot stories by seeing how many uh, crypto publications talk about it, and every single day there's like the SBF news cluster, there's the SEC cluster, there's like the general market moves, which is like this coin jumped 15% or whatever. And then there's just like a bunch of unrelated things. Some of them are opinions. Some of them are, I guess, it's really not, like you said, it's kind of trash.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for sure. Let me just roll the intro graphic and get this thing officially going. Start diving into the stuff. All right, ready?
Right.
3, 2, 1, go. So, hey everyone, happy Friday. Hope you had a great one. I'm joined by the one and only Mark Rizzn Hopkins. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. How about you?
Pretty good. And when I say one and only, there's only one at Rizzn on Twitter. And for once, it's you. For once, it's actually the person, you know?
Right. Yeah. There's a German gamer kid. He's probably not a kid anymore, but he squats my name on just about everything except for Twitter. So Twitter, it's me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good thing to have. I picked the Desert Links many years ago. It was like 2010. I started some blog called the Desert Links. I just wrote some stuff. I was living in Phoenix at the time, and I just thought like Desert Rat, but that was already taken. I was like, yeah, do something like that. And then, it sounded like Desert Fox, something like so. I just kept it, and no one else has really taken it until, I don't know, I got whatever level of when you get like crypto famous up here, and then you get like literally no one knows who you are, and you get like just up to here where still no one knows where you are, but all the scammers are trying to impersonate you. And so that's kind of where I'm at, where everyone's saying a million different permutations. I should have just mass registered all permutations. I should have the Desert Linux out there as well. Anything. But that's always kind of funny. Actually, I'm just going to type into Twitter right now, see if anyone's... Oh, there's no account called the Desert Linux.
Desert Linux.
There's no account. Maybe I'll have to register that if one of you guys doesn't come at
Doesn't
me.
get it by the end of the show.
Yeah, well, again, I have to be actually like semi-famous for that to happen. But one time in the NFT super chat, just post coffee. So yes, I agree. And by the way, because the wife sort of made me, I started measuring my actual espresso beans before putting them in the grinder and stuff. And that's why it takes longer for me to make my copy now. Hope you're happy. Anyway, let's get into the first. As always, by the way, if you have one of my NFTs, you can get into my Discord and leave super chats, which is awesome. If not, if you're in YouTube, there's a YouTube super chat and all that too, which I recently enabled once I figured out how to get fiat from YouTube into crypto to me. And so I'm like, all right, now I can take your dirty fiat and not actually take your dirty fiat. So yep. So there's all that stuff. All right. So first on our agenda is the gift that keeps on giving for the last couple of years, SBF. So this CoinDesk headline: Sam Bankman-Fried's dad thought his son wasn't paying him enough, so he got mom involved. So the overarching thing in this whole story is that the crypto scammer extraordinaire, Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX, has apparently got his family financially involved in this scam operation he's running, known as an exchange, I guess. And the things that popped out to me were mostly that his dad was being paid like $200,000 a year, and he was complaining that wasn't enough. He wanted $1 million a year, and it's pretty crazy. So anyway, the alleged dispute over Joe Bankman's $200,000 salary versus the derived $1 million points to an unusual family dynamic at the former cryptocurrency colossus. Anyway, so his father allegedly, however, expressed discontent and involved his wife, Barbara Fried, in the matter. So my initial gut take on this whole thing, and obviously I didn't look too close into this whole thing, is it seems like his very well-connected parents, which we've been over, many shows in the past, right, have kind of got him to the position where he could here, but also seems like it was reciprocal, where it wasn't just, oh, hey, mom and dad, can you help me, get my crypto exchange started, it seems like they were very well aware of a lot of what was going on and were in on it and using it, for their own benefit. What are some of your key? What kind of things jump out at you about this one?
I mean, it's a lot of this. I mean, like the lawsuit, like the first reading I've been seeing in the business press, the phrase Alameda and FTX is a family affair was a direct quote from early company documentation. So they never, well, I wouldn't say they never, but at least at their inception didn't hide from the fact that SBF was banking on the family name. The father,
I see what you did there.
yeah. Just as an aside, like, how are we not, like, the guy's name is Bankman.
Yeah.
Like, how do we not see this coming?
It's like a Batman villain.
But like, so he was using his father's network, but more to the point of this article, it seems that the father was using the network of that Sam was creating within the world of crypto for his end as well. The story that, or the paperwork that's being read for this CoinDesk article is the same lawsuit papers that are being analyzed by political outlets right now. So the Free Beacon, the Washington Free Beacon, kind of a smaller outfit, but they still have journalistic standards. A lot of the stuff that they talk about in the Beacon article, you can find in the lawsuit. It's just a direct reading of the lawsuit paperwork. And they're talking about Arabella Advisors, which is where SBF's dad was getting their money through. And Arabella Advisors is like an ops group. This is based off of, public information. They're an ops group for left-wing PACs, political action committees. It's no secret that SBF was amongst the largest, if not the largest donor during the last election cycle to Democratic candidates.
Yeah, I think it was the second largest individual donor in politics at all, and the largest Democrat Party donor.
For sure, right. So it really seems like the Bankman-Fried family is no stranger to political fundraising grift. That's why $200,000 seems like a small. You gotta be bigger than that if you want to own my attention, son. Is kind of the implication. And I'll be honest, from my personal perspective, this is like my personal experience dealing with inside the Beltway people during the SBF, FTX, Alameda era, when it was still cool to be pro-innovation and pro-crypto in politics. I was approached through various connections, folks that were looking to exploit my connection with Ukraine DAO to funnel defense budget money, because at the time, and I guarantee you this was the thinking of SBF's dad, it's crypto. Crypto is about money laundering. Money laundering means you can hide money, right? Right? They're not sophisticated at the level that you and I are, where they go, yeah, it's a public ledger. We can all see where the money goes. They're like, oh no, it's like this shadowy super coder money. We can funnel this thing through, and it's just like the new CIA dark budget. I mean, because these were military defense contractor people. They are people that have their ways of funneling money to, different pet causes and war theaters. They just thought that crypto at the time, and I had to educate them. The crypto at the time was like the new way for them to do it. Once they realized, oh yeah, there is a public ledger, and people can see where the money is spent. It's publicly auditable. They were far less interested in laundering money through Ukraine DAO.
Yeah, of course. It honestly, their thinking, while technically incorrect, in a lot of ways is practically correct, because think about with Bitcoin, especially before HD wallets, like we're talking about back in the day when I started using it, it's like one address for everyone. You can just see everything going on, and then people still thought it was like anonymous kind of, because no one had figured out how to trace blockchain movements really. And so it's kind of the same kind of a thing, where if you launder a whole bunch of money through crypto, even though it's like, in my estimation, it's all there, it's so easy to trace, especially for random sleuths on Twitter, just because people aren't like paying attention to the ins and outs, and there isn't, the entry and exit points into the markets aren't super well documented, and the forensics aren't there. Like, it does become something where you can then do it. It's not like the banks will flag you or you get an audit at the bank and it just says, oh, look, you did this bad thing or whatever. And so crypto, especially like it's the same kind of a thing with something like Ukraine, right? The unfortunate situation there, notwithstanding the whole, I guess, ability to launder money through something like that. The whole ability to use that as a proxy, as a catch-all, in order to transfer money from point A to point B, where you wouldn't want the public knowing, hey, why are you paying him this money? Why are you making this money? It's like, well, no, it all went to Ukraine. Never mind. We can't ask questions.
Yeah, very, very specifically, they were looking to do what they do in the private sector, which is making directed donations, right? Which there's nothing illegal about that. But they would have far more opaqueness doing it through traditional structures, right? The problem they were running through is they wanted my guess is they wanted to avoid central bank scrutiny at some level, because why would you put it through crypto otherwise? But when you do a directed donation through an organization that is committed to transparency, like Ukraine DAO, they issue a public real-time report on where their money is spent, because if they don't, they get hammered on Twitter. Right, you got to say where the money went. You can't just take $500 million in and then not spend it. They're going to accuse you of rugging, and which is a rightful accusation if you're not explaining yourself. So it was that quickly died on the vine. Now, what didn't die on the vine is the fact that you can obfuscate those types of things if you're going through a centralized exchange, which is probably what was the dollar signs in the eyeballs of the Bankman-Fried family was going with this. Like, they could just run this through a Bahamian bank that was in service to a hedge fund and an exchange and not have to worry about anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the crypto part of things was just an excuse,
incidental,
for the fiat parts of things. It just made it to where having those kinds of fiat setups made sense for a crypto exchange, whereas it wouldn't for any other kind of, I guess, laundering mechanism. But it is kind of funny how, like, I don't know, I'm sure like mistakes are made, but like as far as like mistakes in its con, but it does seem like these people weren't necessarily the brightest at the end of the day. Like, maybe it's a hubris blinding type thing, because just like the cataclysmic amount of like theft and fraud of, in that whole situation, all the connections, and then all the availability of information just everywhere. And like, even like the Signal Group, what was it, the bank fraud or whatever they called it, the wire transfer fraud, like the kind of almost comic book level. I think it seems to me like it was easy to get away with a lot of sketchy things because of connections in the past, and then at the point of introducing crypto into the mix, they thought, oh yeah, this is even easier, we're untouchable, and then they played it, they flew way too close to the sun, because like, I mean, I think that at this point it's going to become, I think if there had been a little bit more discretion in all these, shady dealings, the connections would have still saved the entire family from repercussions, which is maybe a little bit of a cynical perspective, but it's probably true. I just think they got it so bad that now even their like connections can't even defend them. They're just like, look, you know what, you screwed this up. You got to take one for the team. Sorry. I mean,
look at as contrast. I mean, Coinbase and Binance, they all have their faults. Like, I'm not a booster for any billionaire at any level. I'm not a booster for these big centralized exchanges, because I think everything should be decentralized. But I will tell you that, I mean, Armstrong came from the Houston OTC scene, right? And I know the OTC scene. I know the type of customers that you run into if you're going to be operating at the level that Armstrong was operating at, being the number one or number two guy in Houston as an OTC guy. I know who you're working with, right? So if you're going to be the number one exchange in Asia, if you're Binance, I know who CZ has to work with behind the scenes, doing the OTC stuff that he does, doing all the other deals that he has to do with sovereign nations. Like, you can't be pure as driven snow. That's my point. Doesn't mean you're a bad actor, but it means you can't be pure as driven snow. But they still police themselves, right? They moderate their own, listen to their better angels, in terms of how to behave ethically. Whereas it just seems that there was no attention to the better angels anywhere in the FTX family.
Yeah. It is, as just a little cherry on top. All of them do look like, movie criminals.
Yes.
Like they just
They're very distinctive.
They just look like, just have that face, the scowl, like the black shark eyes, like just everything. Just the goblin stare, just everything. It just works out so perfectly. Well, let's hit on the IOTA stuff, right? Because that kind of came out a little bit of left field. Maybe not for people who are paying more attention to it. But I kind of didn't pay too close attention to IOTA for the last few years. But anyway, basically IOTA is doing a bunch of new stuff. And I kind of glossed over all that because that's not the point of the story. But part of this thing is we'll set up a dedicated ecosystem fund that will help to further decentralize the governance of IOTA and support ecosystem growth. The ecosystem fund will be funded through a temporary token inflation that will last 4 years, increasing the total supply to 4.6 billion IOTA tokens. So,
what is their total circulating supply? Do you know?
Let me actually look that up real quick.
It's a fairly large number, if I recall correctly. I remember it was one of the bigger ones when they launched anyway.
Yeah, I think the total circulating supply is 2.779 billion. So,
okay. So they've done some Federal Reserve level inflation.
Yeah, some Titanic inflation. And I'll just explain the stuff that I know about it because I'm not super deep into this particular story. But from what I know, IOTA is a DAG-based cryptocurrency, kind of like Nano.
That's right.
And as such, because of the limitations of the structure, it basically has to be like 100% pre-mined kind of thing. As in, there's no mining or staking to create the coins. They start out all the way out, and then I guess whatever central party has all the coins finds a way to distribute them. So it's not like a gradual emission type thing. So part of the appeal, and I've heard this said by nano people, but mostly nano people, because they're the one DAG that hasn't done that yet, right now, the one major one, and is like, oh, Bitcoin, you're getting inflated away just like the Federal Reserve, blah blah blah. Obviously, Bitcoin and ones like it are supposed to go to zero anyway with the inflation, but
right.
Now you have this whole like, okay, well, we have a big pot of money to do development stuff, and they promised a lot of things. In 2017, it was like the Solana of 2017. It was like the hype darling, and they've had a bunch of bumps along the road since then. And I guess they just ran out of money to do this kind of stuff. And rather than try to find a donation-based model to do this, or some kind of DAO or something, it appears to be that the developers made an arbitrary decision to create all these coins. And there was, I guess, no meaningful way to generate, to get consent from the average token holders. It was just like, we're going to do this, and we're going to we're going to essentially dilute a giant chunk of people's supply, basically transfer from current holders. And so a lot of people are upset about it. Some people are not, but a lot of people are. What's your take on it?
I mean, there's so many, it's hard to know where to start to dig in on the story because there's so many missteps here. We're talking about missteps in the previous story. There's so many missteps here. Like, so you made the Solana comparison, and I was actually going to make the Solana comparison in a different way because much like Solana, they were one of the first so-called cryptocurrencies, or not really a blockchain, but cryptocurrencies that had to pause and restart the network. They were down for like a week or two due to some sort of DAG resolution error that occurred, I would say probably like 2 or 3 years ago. And I remember saying at the time, and this is way before Solana, like, you can't call yourself a decentralized system if there's a kill switch.
Yeah.
somewhere in the middle. That's not decentralization. That is literally the opposite of decentralization. And I've said it every time Solana has hit their kill switch too, or their reset button or whatever it is. And I said it, I think, whenever didn't Coinbase just hit their reset button a couple weeks ago. So like you can say you're more decentralized than a centralized system, but you can't put yourself in the same category as a decentralized, system like Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything else if you've got a kill switch. So that in and of themselves was the first. That was why I fled from the hills when it came to IOTA years ago. Is because to me it was a failed project the moment they hit the button.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some interesting from my perspective, and I did have someone on the channel from IOTA like in 2021 or something, like not too long ago, and they apparently explored some changes since then. But in the very beginning, part of the hype was infinite scalability, no fees, all this kind of stuff. And quickly they found out that the model didn't necessarily work that way, so they implemented something called the coordinator, which is a completely centralized node that just acts as finality for all transactions. And when they did have that downtime you mentioned, maybe you're talking about a different downtime, but probably not. A lot of these spam messages had included the message "coordinator sucks," so it was like a direct anti-centralization middle finger kind of thing. And since then, the hyped, I guess, upgrade for IOTA is always, or the hyped project has been something called Coordicide, where they were going to supposedly get rid of the coordinator and go to a completely decentralized system. And they were talking about Coordicide in 2020, 2021, last time I checked. And as far as I'm aware, the coordinator is still there today. And of course, if someone's a big IOTA guy in the comments or whatever, just please let me know if I'm wrong on this. I don't want to be wrong, but I'm
happy to be wrong about stuff too if I'm learning something new.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the IOTA thing has been kind of interesting because a lot of the way the value proposition was instant feeless transactions for Internet of Things types applications. And I think what they figured out is they could not quite make that work. They too much ignoring laws of physics there. It's so they were looking into a sort of mana model where if you staked IOTA, you'd get like a gas token that would rot over time. Like you couldn't just hold it forever. It would kind of rot over time. And then so if you staked it, that would give you power to then process transactions, or you could sell it to people. So it's kind of like an indirect fee mechanism kind of thing. And from my understanding as well, they were trying to work on smart contracts, don't really have them at the moment. And it's just one of those I mentioned middling fee model kind of things. I've been really big on the fee revenue kind of drum lately. But it's almost every price chart you see for let's just say the 2017 era, but any era, right? You have a coin, comes out, hits its big hype cycle, and then goes down. Where the investors throw money at it to see if it will do something cool. And then if it doesn't do anything cool, then they don't have a business model after that. And so it's the successful projects are the ones that have managed to grow their customer base and get new people coming in and spending fees on the network, although even the most successful cryptos are still kind of low on the total fee revenue part of things, but it's still kind of early in the whole systems. But I think that's kind of where we're at is IOTA, just like almost any other project that a hype cycle back in that day, is just running out of money and investor patience to deliver a working product that customers will use.
But yeah, so and their value proposition from the original white paper has never been more relevant. Is the most frustrating thing in my mind. Yeah, look, right now AI is hot. Internet of Things is, although we don't call it that anymore, which was the inspiration for the title, IOTA, is super hot. You can go to Sequoia and A16Z. If they had simply, I guarantee you, if they had treated IOTA tokens as if they were distributed ownership of the network, of which I'm sure the founders and the current operators still have a disproportionately large stake in, I'm sure, and said, let's go to some traditional VCs and let structure some investment into the same type of decentralized fund, but let current token holders take some money off the table from VC and then use the rest to fund further development. something in that realm. I'm not saying that's a perfect proposal, but something in that realm would have been received. It's money flowing the opposite direction from the way it currently is. You're not inflating current user tokens. You're saying, hey, do you want a liquidity event for being an early adopter of this thing and support the future of the network? Who wouldn't want both of those things if you're an IOTA booster? Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do? There's money, there's multi-billion-dollar funds that want to go into this exact value prop.
Yeah, I mean, that the thing is, I guess, with crypto, that does tend to be a securities offering at that point, which is,
But if you're a VC, you're prepared. You have legal teams that can deal with the securities filings you'd need to make that happen.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting because crypto, and this has been crypto has this weird, like, Bitcoin kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of people, right? And as a currency, as a natural resource, as whatever you want to call it, and one of the most challenging aspects of crypto and mass adoption has been volatility, and a lot of that is because the gas token is the investment token at the same time, and so you get investors buying to speculate on a gas token, and it just like it kind of throws things out of whack. There's this one project that's a Thorchain fork called the Maya protocol, which intentionally released two different tokens. One's a Maya token and one's the Cacao token, which is like the gas token for doing all the AMM trades. And the Maya token gets 10 holders of that. All it does is, it's not a governance token, but holders of that token get 10% of all fees that the network generates. And so the developers have some, they sell them, they to raise money, I guess. They pay people, like pay staff in those things. And so as such, like if you wanted to ape into Maya, for example, you would just find a way to get a big bag of these Maya tokens, and then the actual future business and success of the network gets paid to those investors who then do it, rather than try to speculate on some like utility gas token and pump it here and then it goes down. And then
very much like the Moloch DAO architecture. I don't know if you're familiar with the Moloch DAO architecture, but Moloch DAO's got, every Moloch DAO has two tokens. One is the loot token and one is the governance token, and the loot tokens only represent proportional ownership of what's in the treasury, and the governance token is the one that just makes the decision. So it's it can be something that has a market value, but not necessarily. So that makes sense. It's a smarter way to go. It's a little bit more egalitarian.
Yeah, and if you think about it, the volatility has become an issue for a lot of cryptocurrencies, and the solution, the temporary solution, the band-aid on that was to use the crypto as a gas to run stable coins. And so if you use, like, let's say if you're using Ethereum, honestly, you're probably using stable coins and then other tokens and financial instruments on the network, but mostly that's what the end user is using. They don't get the volatility of the Ethereum gas going up and down. I mean, they don't have to experience that with their holdings. Whereas, the token's kind of something different. And a lot of these kind of cash type tokens, like the Bitcoin Cash, the Monero Dash, Zcash, those kinds of things, have speculative ups and downs that really screw around with the utility, because people are saying, is the project going anywhere? I'm going to ape into this like basic gas token, this like financial gas token, and then it becomes kind of an issue. So probably, on just like a random side note, if any of those kind of cash tokens get a good stablecoin going that works well and uses the base currency for gas, I think that'll kind of solve the big mass adoption hurdle to just get things going at least and stabilize the price.
But these old currencies that you've mentioned and their ilk are moving the opposite direction. Unfortunately, I don't know if you saw this news a couple of weeks ago. We talked about it on the merge. The OmniLayer Tether basically is winding down, which seems the opposite direction of where you want to be going. But maybe I'm just reading the tea leaves wrong. There's a better technology looking to supplant it or something. But why would you, especially with the excitement that's happening, that's no longer in the Bitcoin ecosystem, that has less and less to do with Bitcoin itself, with Lightning and ordinals and inscriptions, and why are you moving away from something that adds to the utility of that ecosystem by getting rid of your stablecoin? But
it probably just has to do something with it's just not a good vehicle for the stablecoin, technologically speaking. Whereas like you could do it easier on like Arbitrum, let's just say. And so,
Sure. But if you're in the Bitcoin ecosystem, Arbitrum does you no good.
of course, yeah, that's the thing is Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is also pivoted away from being gas and has been pivoted towards, the base asset. Like what Bitcoin as a gas allows you to move Bitcoin. And that's
Right.
kind of where they're at right now. And so
I am enjoying watching them fight amongst themselves, the ordinals guys and the maxis.
and the drive
at least
chainers.
there's a chance for some, innovation coming back to that network. I mean, people call me Dr. Bitcoin. That was my first love. Even though I use a lot of other stuff, I don't want Bitcoin to stagnate. I want them to become something more than what they are today. So anyway,
Yeah.
kind of a side note.
Let's hit on the Zcash thing because this sort of came out of kind of nowhere.
Yeah, it's got a quote from your buddy. You're talking the Brave thing,
Yeah.
or is this? Yeah. Your buddy Zuku was quoted in this article.
The Zooks. Yep. So Brave posted something says today at Mainnet 2023 we announced a partnership with Electric Coin Company and the Filecoin Foundation. First, we'll integrate the Zcash protocol into the Brave wallet. Wallet users will be able to trade and store Zcash in addition to other cryptocurrencies. And then, let's scroll down here a little bit. We will also develop a private decentralized messaging feature for Brave Wallet that utilizes the Zcash protocol and IPFS. These features will give Brave users more flexibility and privacy protection. Yeah, that kind of came out of a little bit of nowhere for me, but it is kind of interesting. Before I just say what I don't know on, I'd like to know what you think before I start spilling all the stuff I think.
Well, actually, I have some questions for you to help shape my thinking because I know you're a bigger Zcash person than I am. I've of course been aware of the project like most people. I've used it. I've used Monero. I've used some other privacy coins in the past. I like Zcash. I like the people involved, but I don't understand the technology at a fundamental level like I do other blockchain technologies. So, how are they? Are they just embedding details in like the data section of a transaction? Is that how they're going to do private messaging? Do you know the details of how this is going to be executed?
I actually don't know the details, but that is
Okay.
one thing that makes Zcash, I guess, unique is the encrypted memo field. Like I'm sure just like any, crypto has like an op return type thing.
Yeah, op
And
return,
so
yeah.
most Zcash wallets that I know of have a memo field, and so you could kind of leave a little like message along with the thing. And because it's I think only for shielded transactions, and so because of this, if I send you a payment in shielded Zcash, I can just say, payment for services rendered, blah blah blah, and then only you can see that. The rest of the network, of course, can't deduce the extra information. So it is something I use a whole lot to keep track, especially like for business expenses and stuff. I know what is an owner's draw here because I set it in the actual transaction. I know what is a expense for this. So my guess is they, at least what I guess it could be is when you send a transaction, you send like a dust kind of transaction with the encrypted memo in there, and it just goes boop, and it just shows up. Now the problem with that, I
was going to say transaction fees, right? What's the minimum transaction fee on a Zcash transaction?
It's really low so far, but that's not the concern. There's been something that's happened over the last year with Zcash, which has been almost like an existential issue, which has been what they call the sandblasting attack. Because for purposes of extra privacy, of like hiding literally everything, and some argue going too far, like kind of compromising some utility of the network in order to get more private than you would need, is there's just a base fixed fee for all transactions. So you remove that like linkability of like, oh, this is a higher one, therefore I can kind of, even though I can't see anything, even though it's all zero knowledge. And so as a result, some entities started to send very large transactions, like not with tons of inputs and outputs and everything, and not too many in terms of raw number of transactions, just very intense transactions. And so full nodes and desktop kind of like clients were doing fine. But mobile wallets, we were really struggling to sync. And so the old mobile wallets were basically kind of bricked. Like they couldn't even sync all the way up to, to current transactions because they'd have to process these giant transactions going through. And so it's kind of like a scaling issue. And there's a few changes that are being implemented to, there might be some changes to the fee mechanism where it'd be by transaction size, not just, flat across the board. But most things have been different ways of syncing wallets that like will ignore all of those kinds of big transactions. And so anyway, basically,
what about node sharing? Is there privacy implications on Zcash with node sharing?
With note sharing, like is it
node, like sharing a node, like if you're like on an Ethereum wallet, you share a node with hundreds of users or thousands.
Yeah, I mean there is to a certain extent because you do have at that point like IP address leakage to where you could say like, oh, we know exactly what location. So if someone knows my IP address, they're like, oh, there he is, he's transacting again. But I don't think they know how much or where, like just no information other than that.
They would just know that this IP address is transacting Zcash, basically.
Yeah, and then if you know someone in his if you also like have someone working at like Gemini, and then you're like, oh, well, someone just deposited money on Gemini. If you have someone on the inside or whatever, someone just deposited Zcash on Gemini. Right around the same time frame as this IP address, you can kind of start to create some linkage. It's not that bad, but it's still, it is still something.
Interesting. Well, it wouldn't be that difficult. And here we are, just going to try to spec out a technical solution with half-baked ideology or half-baked knowledge of the.
That's what the show is for.
Yeah. There we go. I'm a media guy, so I'm allowed. It wouldn't be that difficult to. Because there are services out there that allow you to provision VPSs with crypto via API. So to design a mobile wallet that provisions your own private node on like Amazon or DigitalOcean infrastructure that you and you alone use, but isn't actually on your wallet. So it's syncing via the internet, not actually on your own pocket device.
Yeah, there was a Zcash wallet, I think it was called Zec wallet, that I don't think is continued anymore, but they had like a full node implementation and a full node GUI wallet as well as a companion Android app, so you could run your full node at home and then just connect via your phone and just do that. And that sounded great. Unfortunately, it stopped being maintained for whatever reason, and the wallet situation is a little bit of a mess. There's a million half broken wallets floating around, and they're kind of all being fixed. But so that would really help a lot of things. Now, as far as like every single transaction with like a memo, like Zcash, I think has 1.25 minute blocks for like a block interval, and so
immediacy is going to be an issue too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Immediacy of like a back and forth message, it'd be a little weird. Like I don't exactly know. Like I'm sure you could detect an encrypted memo in a transaction in the mempool, right? That would probably be, I don't know if you can do. So you could probably do that. So maybe you could just send 1 million back and forth, and they'd all just get confirmed.
Interesting. Can you do the free signing thing like you can do on Bitcoin, like where you don't pay a gas fee to sign a wallet or sign a transaction? And you do that on Ethereum too, like. Yeah, if you could do a free signing, that's why they're probably using IPFS then. Maybe they're putting an encrypted data packet on IPFS and you sign on your wallet to signify that you're the owner of it.
Yeah.
Or we could just read the white paper, I suppose. But yeah, that would be how I would do it if I was trying to be feeless. Yeah.
Probably not live. Although
yeah. Let's do a live reading of a white paper.
live white paper reading show. That'd be that'd make sure we have even fewer people watching. It'd be great.
Right.
But it is kind of an interesting thing that we're going to start on a greater kind of thing. Zcash has had some interesting struggles these days because of the price not going super great, and then some funding issues as a result of that, and but most importantly, like the spam attack kind of thing. And also, as far as I am aware, in the next couple of years, Monero is going to be shifting to basically using Zcash's privacy technology, and Monero's more, I guess, well established in the space, and so kind of like a competitor killer type deal. And so what really matters, obviously, at the end of the day is adoption, and just mom and pop adoption is just really tricky to do. And so these kinds of things where it's like, oh, all of a sudden this big product that like everyone uses, like tons of people use, now all of a sudden you're just going to have the Zcash wallet right in there. And even if you don't want to send and receive Zcash, you can, by using the messaging feature in some way, I'm sure if it uses the Zcash network, that will contribute to then the network profitability, right? The gas fees, you will need to, at least someone somewhere will need to buy some Zcash in order to put these messages out there.
Yeah,
so
theoretically.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we could, speculate a lot more about how that would work, but it is kind of a power move to like get into Brave. And I have to say, like, I'm a big fan of Monero and what it's able to do, like the user experience of privacy, especially. I think it's the best user experience for an advanced privacy function currently.
Right.
And you can buy a lot of real things with it and stuff. That being said, I am a little bit looking forward to seeing some people salty on Twitter about this thing, because there has been a Monero versus Zcash thing for a long time. And, well, I don't really care for that either way. It will be kind of funny to see, like, why didn't you do it on Monero or whatever? And just from a drama queen kind of like sipping on tea like standpoint, from my point of view, not anything useful.
Well, I mean, like I'm right there with you. I mean, I like Monero. I've used Monero in the past. I don't use it as an investment vehicle or anything like that, but it's been a good utility project for me in various ways. I've used Zcash to a lesser extent, but I've been following the adoption, and some of them, they've been adopted in markets that Monero will never be adopted in. Monero has a very specific type of user for the most part. I wish them well. I think that I agree with you very much that this is going to have a positive impact, because their primary competitor stops being Monero if this messaging product takes off and starts becoming Signal. And Signal is a company I have a lot of mixed feelings about. I'm an avid Signal user,
of course,
but it feels like it could be, especially with their Signal coin integration, it could be done way better, right? Like I don't agree with or appreciate the comments of the Signal founding team's comments around cryptocurrency and blockchain in general. There have been some troubling moves with the locking down of their source code over the years. I would trust the Zcash team with private messaging protocol far further than I would trust the Signal team.
Mm-hmm. And it would be interesting. I mean, this is just more pie in the sky kind of speculation, but it'd be interesting. One of the big criticisms from people I know, at least, on Signal is when they decided to enable payments, they did this weird mobile coin thing. In fact, I know some people who actually lost some money on FTX who had never thought they would, because that was the only place they could really get mobile coin. And so they just had some just to try to use in Signal. These people just lost money that they would otherwise be way smarter than to, leave to use FTX, much less leave stuff on there. But and it just seems like it would make sense to just enable something like Zcash for payments in Signal itself. Maybe a merger of like the protocols might be good. Again, once we figure out how they actually work. But I'd really have to see how it ends up working out, because the wallet situation in Zcash is still kind of touch and go at the moment. So, but big news either way, right? I'm cautiously optimistic for sure.
Generally bullish for Zcash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely after this. Let's hit on the Twitter thing, right? Because
oh yes,
you tweeted, lol, what? But more importantly about Musk says X will charge all users a small monthly payment. I've thought about this stuff a whole lot, so I'll let you get some fresh thoughts into this thing.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about it about an hour ago on my other on my weekly show as well, because it's I think I was given, I mean, not that Musk needs my permission to do anything, but I was kind of giving him like a loose rope to either hang himself with or pull me along for the ride under his tenure at what used to be called Twitter. But because I'm like the first like 500,000 users of Twitter. I've been around since Biz and Ev would be able to would still come in and comment on my blog posts. So
Wow.
I'm amongst, needless to say, Twitter's most diehard user base. I feel
Yeah,
like he's
I mean,
losing me with this move.
to be fair, like I'm just looking up. It's your Twitter says you joined in 2006, which is kind of an OG move. I joined in 2012, and I mean that's 11 years ago, but it's like
Yeah.
you definitely got me beat by a good amount. I think I barely even joined Facebook in 2007 or something. But yeah, definitely you've been there since the beginning.
Right. I mean, and I mean, I can claim I'm one of the people who watch this show know who Pete Cashmore is, the founder of Mashable. But I got Pete Cashmore to open a Twitter account. That's how long I've been on Twitter. So Mashable being a major social media publication. So anyway, yeah, I feel like what this is going to do is going to. I'm not saying this will kill Twitter, but this will kill the platform for anybody who thinks they're going to recognize what this platform used to be. Like this will be the move that transforms it to something else. Because if you look back over this is going to turn it into X. This is going to turn it into something that's not an open platform. Like the founders of the platform, very quickly after they got done being, amazed that their little weekend project turned into a major phenomenon, they envisioned the future of this thing being the central nervous system of the internet. And for the first 4 or 5 years of Twitter, starting in 2007 forward, they were in the business of making it almost like a base level internet signaling protocol. Like that was the thought. There was talk of federation, sharing protocol, like the whole activity pub protocol that Mastodon's network Fediverse is built off of, that came out of a collaboration between Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and a company called Plaxo, which is no longer with it. They're part of Comcast now. That these 4 organizations came up with that basically together. So it was, and then the VCs got involved as they had to further fundraise. And the VCs basically, Fred Wilson put out a memo, I want to say 2008, 9, 10, somewhere in that era, where he basically said, if you're in the business of filling potholes on Twitter, get out of that business because we're coming for you. Fred Wilson being one of the early investors in Twitter.
Yeah.
And it was from that moment on, it stopped being a protocol project and started becoming a platform project. So in many ways, I think what Musk is doing now has always been inevitable, but it definitely marks the end of an era of it being any type of an open platform.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I would say it's the end of an era of Web 2, kind of, as it were. Because Web 2 basically had the promise of Web 3, but just like it was Web 2 was it's a quotable, I guess. Web 2 was a Web 3 LARP, where there was all these platforms that did well by pretending to be something that didn't exist yet, right? Like a free open platform, while still being a centralized company run platform, right? They're pretending to be this cool thing. They're selling that sort of, not really fully selling it because they weren't claiming to be decentralized or anything, but they're sort of selling the Web3 experience to like a Web 2 world. And then over time, that's starting to like, now you have like federal agencies cracking down on like pressuring these kinds of, like Facebook has an anti-terrorism office. Like, it's insane to think about, right? That's definitely not a Web3 type thing. It's definitely not an open platform type thing. And so now like reality's catching up.
Uniswap does not have a anti-terrorism office. That's for sure.
Yes. And so it's kind of catching up to where I think that Twitter is probably becoming one of the first of those old school Web3 platforms that's still around. Like, MySpace ain't anymore really, or it is, but whatever. But to capitulate and finally be like, look, we were never an open platform. We just were trying to pretend to be. Now we're just going to be the best closed platform we can be. And then capitulate. And then before you know it, Facebook's going to have to do the same. Before you know it, everything's going to have to do the same. And then that's going to either get people snapped into those systems, or they're going to flee to the Nosters of the world, or whatever, the blue skies, the whatever's going on that's the current, the Fediverse, all that stuff, whatever's a little bit more actually open and decentralized. It's going to kind of push them apart. But on that sort of general subject, what do you think is the paying to be able to post, more than a revenue model? It appears to be an anti-spam model. And obviously
civil resistance, right?
Yes, and obviously crypto uses this as well, at least, the Bitcoin-based ones, right? Now, what do you think would be an alternative to this model for a social network?
So this is actually, I know Jen's, and my producer in the other room, is taking notes because he's working on a mini doc that kind of encompasses this topic as well. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've been we've been developing is like this death of social media. If you look back throughout history the short history of social media, large scale social media platforms have never been profitable. Mm-hmm. They've had quarters of profitability, much like Uber or airlines. There's quarters where they've hit profitable numbers, but it's either been attempts at hyper growth or just a dejected acceptance of the fact that they're running at a loss at the expense of having users so they can monetize them in other ways. Like Meta's whole thing being we can't be profitable off of ads, but maybe we can sell them headsets and stuff like that. VR headsets. So given that as a backdrop, given the fact that we know from sociology that Dunbar's number effectively limits the number of connections that a human being can maintain at any point in their life to somewhere around between 100 and 200 people, we can assume that modern hyperscale social media projects are a failed experiment, and they will fade from the public eye over time. That does not necessarily mean that a single protocol to rule them all will emerge. It will probably look a lot like it did in the early days of the internet. From 1965 to 1995, there were hundreds of communications protocols that attacked various market sectors that had varying levels of adoption. In the early, the first 6 or 7 years of the web, it was a diaspora of what we would now call social media or community websites that really didn't have more than a few thousand users at any given point, right? And my old man yells at Sky, and we liked it better that way. They literally called it the September that never ended when AOL joined the internet, when it brought consumer adoption to the internet. It was because that there was like the first major real social network, large scale hyperscale social network that joined the internet, right? They joined the web. Before that, most new users to the internet were people that were entering college every September. And, you had like 2 or 3 months of chaos where you got people accustomed to how to behave on the internet. But then one September, AOL joined and it was all over, right? And so I think the future of social media looks more like a diaspora, because if you have a federated approach or a Dunbar limited number approach to social networking, it's more easy. I wouldn't say it's more easy. It's possible to have community management. It's impossible to do community management at scale when you're Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or any of these major. It's impossible. You cannot have any sort of cultural values, ethos. It's impossible to know more than a few thousand people, let alone have relationships with them. But if I have my Mastodon server for my close group of friends and their close group of friends, it's possible for everybody on that server to have some level of a relationship and some knowledge of everybody else on it.
Yeah. So it's, to a certain extent, when you start to disintermediate the whole social networks to where now it's like little pods here and there, you can have the individual attention to just kick out spammers and bots and stuff and implement specific kind of rules to get rid of those kinds of things, as long as people can kind of liaise across ponds. One thing I've noticed that like with Mastodon, because I've been using Mastodon for a few years now, the local silo things, like the local communities, only offer so much, so you have to dip outside of them. And to dip outside of them, wherever I've seen success has been very peer-to-peer, as in where I know someone from another network and follow them, or someone just happens to do. The interconnectedness is not very strong. However, when you go to like the federated timeline or whatever, where you see everything, it's just overrun with bots and porn. Just that's like all it is. And so that becomes a little bit of it's a user experience.
But it depends on who's running your server, right? So like what I see emerging out of because most people's experience with Mastodon is definitely subpar. It's very similar to what you described, because they approach it as if they would approach a regular social network. They go to mastodon.social if the registrations are open. If the registrations aren't open, they look at a list of other Mastodon servers and they go, I want to join that one. But did you know there are, just like there's WordPress self-hosting, for $9 a month, you can run a single user instance, a single user up to 100 user instance of Mastodon through masto.host. And you can have 100 of your best friends on that server for $9 a month. And when you have a single user instance, or even one of those low end $9 a month accounts with you got 100 people on it, it's possible to moderate that federated timeline, because what shows up in that federated timeline is the public timelines of every Mastodon instance that has a friend-to-friend connection to one of the users on your instance, right? Yeah. So being able to set filters and rules when you are the admin of your own instance is a lot easier and manageable when you don't have 50,000 users or 10,000 users. You got 100 users, you can go in there once a day or once every 5 days and pretty well manage all the nastiness that would emerge.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is I'm kind of I'm sort of torn on that approach. Like half of me gets excited, the other half doesn't. It's my like DIY self, like Linux, my Linux running, compiling from source code side is like loving it, but then my like wanting mass adoption side is not loving it, because of it's how much like work it is to just construct your own thing from scratch, whereas a lot of people want out of the box solutions, which is like Twitter is. And so I think it might even be a business type opportunity for someone to take these decentralized protocols, whichever ones become the dominant ones, and to, I guess, curate a Twitter-like experience for people, and then just have the tweaks on the sides. So if you want to then customize at a later date, you can. But just like set it up for Granny kind of thing, so Granny can get to shit posting.
I mean, it's exactly what happened in the WordPress ecosystem, right? You've got Matt Mullenweg's company that does WordPress hosting. It's the largest WordPress hosting organization that exists, but they are not anti-competitive towards other shared hosting or independent hosting solutions. They maintain the open source software, and there is a cottage industry of, freelancers and small agencies that will customize WordPress, whether you're trying to be like the New York Times or you're trying to have a personal blog. And there's a range of open source options. I think it's going to look a lot like that. We just have to get this mass social network a taste out of our mouth. Like we've got an appetite for it because it's a very addictive model, but the model that existed prior to this worked very well.
Yeah, the one thing I think is kind of interesting is, for me, the big barrier to the curated little, micro social networks, whatever, is account and data information and data that gets kind of siloed in each of these sorts of things. And that's one of the things about, like, for example, Mastodon, when you start with an instance and the instance might ban you. Sure, you can switch to another instance, but it's not the same person at the other instance. It's like a completely separate account. And being able to have like a universal but still decentralized under your control account kind of thing is sort of the holy grail, I think, that stitches together all these things and lets people.
And I think
yeah,
Nostra does better, right? I wish Mastodon was a little bit more like Nostra, and Nostra was a little bit more like Mastodon. Mastodon is much easier to grok as a newbie. Nostra has better first principles.
Yeah. It's so, I think at the end of the day, like the Nostra style account, like crypto based sort of thing, the based on like your private keys and stuff, is going to be, it is sort of the missing link as long as you can do it in a usability. Like
it's atrocious, and you gotta get a Nostra set up and running. If you don't know, if you're not a geek like us that understands crypto language, I can't point my wife at this, let alone my grandma.
Yeah, I mean, and even like myself, like I find myself to be like a lazy user, and like I can't figure out the zaps or anything. It's like maybe you need a centralized wallet or whatever for that, and it's just like it's a little. It's kind of like it's very much like the RSS feed type era of the internet, where people actually use those on a more common basis. But I mean, I think it's a solvable problem. We'll see what happens in the future. There's a lot of interesting stuff in that kind of direction. Well, might as well wrap up on the DAO subject, which nothing I just saw is float across my timeline when you tweeted it, and then I just thought, because I've been thinking about DAOs a lot, and it kind of is interesting. So this squiggly hair shanks person, whatever, I don't know. I don't even know who these people are on Twitter. They just are. Says, as someone who's been part of multiple DAOs, I can tell you with 100% certainty that DAOs have no future. They're like communism. A theoretical, benevolent, and trustworthy, but in reality could not be. And then you, my friend, who bounced just now apparently from the thing, that as someone who's been part of multiple DAOs, this sounds like a skill issue, bro. So I would really like to know what the kind of experience with a DAO kind of thing is. Yeah. Anyway. So let me just give him a second to see if he can rejoin. If not, it might be a good thing to wrap up on. But I guess where my headspace is at least, with the whole DAO issue, has been in the past, I kind of thought, when I heard about DAOs, right, it seemed to be a great solution to the whole tragedy commons situation with Bitcoin, for example. And it's, to a certain extent, the DAO seems like a holy grail of like, how do we organize ourselves as a society, as a community, as a decentralized money project, as whatever else. How do we do that in a kind of quantifiable way where we don't need like a coercive government to kind of run things, or a centralized entity? How do we organize, because we do need to be organized in a decentralized kind of a way? And so for me, the DAO has been sort of a holy grail in that way. However, having been part of a DAO, or participating with the Dash DAO mostly, but others as well, for past 7 or so years, like governments, I notice they have a lot of inefficiencies in kind of like the way things work. So first off, you have the tragedy, you have socialization of benefits as well as costs, where if it's like majority stakeholder vote, sure, it's by stakeholder, it's not necessarily by individual personhood, where you might have like 8 dumb people and 2 smart people, and the 2 smart people get out competed. You might have the more capital allocated people able to then vote. It kind of does solve that issue a little bit. The problem with that, though, is it still is it removes the risk of doing a stupid decision if everyone is in on the stupid decision. The loss is socialized if you do something dumb. The loss is socialized across the entire DAO. And so it makes people a little bit more likely to do dumb things. But on the other side, if you have a great idea and you're willing to take a risk behind it, like the entrepreneur side of things, if you're able to do that, then it really ends up you have to convince the rest of the DAO, and if you don't convince them, it just doesn't happen. So the good idea could just go away. And the entrepreneur side of things, in the real world, the entrepreneur does it anyway, and then it fails or it doesn't, and then it succeeds, and then that kind of grows, and you kind of get the benefits from that. And with the DAO structure, if someone has a good idea and they say they do persuade everyone to vote for it, and the good idea happens and everyone's better off, the people who did not push hard for it, either people who voted no or the people who, well, let's just say the no voters. Let's say it's like a 6-4 yes to no, and the proposal passes, whatever this hypothetical thing is, and it's beneficial. The 4 no votes benefit from the yes votes equally. There is no incentive to be right beyond. There's no incentive. There's not a strong incentive to be right, because everyone else just kind of freeloads off of that thing. It's socialization. I wouldn't say it's socialism, because it's not, but it's socializing profits and losses from this thing across these decision making. So I guess in a situation where a DAO is a good way to say, all right, let's all donate money to this thing, and then in exchange get governance tokens, and then vote based on, like, it's a good way of getting together for like-minded people to kind of direct a cause in a certain sort of a way. But areas where you don't really care for money efficiency super well, it kind of works that way. It just starts to struggle, I think, with efficiency versus like a complete free market kind of a thing if everyone is forcibly under a DAO, right? So for example, like if you are getting your road paved with your neighbors, all your neighbors contribute to a DAO, and then you vote on who's the best contractor to get this done with the money, blah, 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 and there you go. And whoever donates more, gets a bigger say in how this is done. At some point, though, like, all your neighbors could be idiots or lazy, and they just want whatever's done, and you would rather do this better, but the problem is you can't get out of the DAO, or if you do, does your little smidgen of road not get paved? Is there the tragedy of the commons thing? That's where it starts to get a little weird, is where you can kind of do that. Or if the DAO is stupid and you want to do things better, how do you start your own DAO? Do you have to, like, now pay twice for things because you already paid for this one and then that one? It starts to then become a little bit of a, it starts to kind of run into some kind of things, some kind of problems. Let me see. He says, just waiting for moderator approval. Interesting. Well, I don't see any kind of he kind of screwed me lately with its kind of weird way it's been doing things. But anyway, it's probably a good time to just wrap this thing up. I'll just type to him. I can't see how to let you in. I'll probably just wrap up instead, because this whole DAO conversation might be better served for a much longer conversation anyway. So, because, yeah, I can really get into some interesting stuff. Let me just hit on the one-time super chat first, though. Let me get to that one. So he says, a DAO is not at all like communism. It's an openly decentralized system and an economic entity whose actions are decided voluntarily. Yes, that is true. Now, whenever you get together and do this, as I was mentioning, it does have a collective way of doing things. The thing that makes a DAO not like a democratic government type system, which I say that not as a compliment, right? The way it's not like that is that it's, first off, it's open participation, meaning the big thing is it's open participation. You participate in the DAO if you want to. If you don't, you don't. As long as it's an open participation system where you can say, I'll start my own DAO with hookers and blow, whatever, then it's definitely something better. It definitely has the better competitive effect, and also the ability to decide your level of participation. Whereas, like, what I would think would be a great improvement to a lot of like government and tax systems is only taxpayers can vote. And if you don't want to pay taxes, you can opt out of paying taxes and you just don't get to vote. And that way, to realign those kinds of incentives. And so, yeah, I'm still brainstorming a lot of ways of because I think the DAO is a huge innovation. I think it's necessary. And I see a lot of flaws with a lot of implementations of it. And I'm just trying to figure out the perfect system. There is no such thing, spoiler alert. But I'm trying to figure out the perfect system that optimizes all of these things. All right, well, I'm going to wrap this thing up now. Everyone, thanks for watching. Thanks, Mark, for being on. Sorry you got booted off. Sorry there was jitsy technical issues. But definitely do it again sometime. Everyone, comment, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. Let me know if you have any other requests for any other cool stuff. And I will see you guys next week. There might be 3 live shows next week because I'm trying to get in, obviously, the regular news show, but also the Zcash podcast, which I was trying to schedule for today, but it didn't end up working out. And then there's the Dash podcast, right about a week minus a half an hour from right now. So that'll be fun. All right, guys, have a good one. See you guys around. Have a good weekend. And don't forget, taxation is theft.